Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this matchup between Vidit Gujrathi and Hans Niemann. The first set went to Hans Niemann in the 4 minutes plus 2 seconds increment. This is the second set in which Vidit is leading with a score of 2.5, 1.5. The first to reach 6 points will be the winner in this set. This is the fifth game. The time control is 3 minutes plus 2 seconds increment. Hans and Vidit both set up their pieces. Vidit helps Hans to set up a few there, and a little kid comes to make the opening move. And maybe it's his parent in the distance taking a picture. E4 it is. Shake of hands with both the players. Vidit takes back the pawn, adjusts it, and off we go. Let's go. E4 by Vidit. Sicilian by Hans Niemann. This is going to be a fight. Vidit goes for the Rosolimo. G6 played here. And Vidit quickly castles it out. Bishop comes to G7. And now pawn to C3, trying to build a center here with D4. Rook defends the pawn. Hans castles. And now pawn to D4 is on the board. D5 played by black, pushing the pawn. Knight comes into the center. This is all well-known theory, which is why both the players are blitzing it out. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. And now queen to B6, attacking the bishop here. Vidit has to decide how to play. He can take the knight on C6. He can play queen E2, which is what he does, defending the bishop there. And then bishop to D7. Wow, now there are some threats in the position which were knight E5. So Vidit defends the bishop here. And pawn to A6 played. The bishop comes back to D3. Now the b4 square is a little bit soft, which is where Hans puts his knight and attacks Vidit's bishop. And Vidit may want to give it up. That's fine. You know, he can just play his bishop to e4 perhaps. But then the queen is very well positioned here, and he attacks it with a5, which is the best move in the position. Now the queen can go back to d8. That's possible. But then after pawn takes pawn, the e4 pawn can get weak after knight g5. So it's an important moment. Hans plays his queen to e6. And the question remains whether Vidit wants to take on e4 or wants Hans to take on d3. For example, he can also bring his knight out. But after knight takes d3, queen takes d3, the position should be roundabout even. So Vidit there taking his time. Hans has 2 minutes 47 seconds. Vidit closing in on the 2-minute mark. We'll see what he comes up with here. And I'm sure he's calculating bishop takes e4, pawn takes e4, and now knight to g5, attacking the queen and the pawn. The queen comes to f5 defending. Knight comes in to attack once again. So lot of pressure on the e4 pawn. How does Hans now defend that pawn is the question. Maybe the best way is to play bishop to c6 to defend the pawn. And he does it, bishop c6. But now Vidit has g4 move at the right time. You know, let's say for example, you can even go g4 here. When Hans has to move away, let's say queen d7, and then he can win the pawn. The only problem here is that for the pawn, you've weakened your king a bit, and Vidit has to assess the pros and cons of this decision, which is why he's taking his time. He's taking his time here, and he says, I don't want to indulge in it right now. I'm threatening to push the pawn if you give me that chance. And so right now, Hans has to do something against this d5 move. He goes rook a d8, stopping d5. And now the threat could be at the right time to push the knight away with h6. For Vidit, actually, there's no real plan apart from going g4, which is what he does now. Queen goes back to c8, and he must take the pawn in the center. Now he's a pawn up. Hans goes king h8 because he's preparing f5 now. This is a very, very dangerous position for Vidit, but of course he's a pawn up. He needs to be careful. He doesn't have the light squared bishop. That's his main problem. While Hans has it, and it's a powerful bishop there. Also, the knight can settle in on the d5 square, so one can feel that black has compensation for the missing pawn. f3 is a good move, limiting that bishop on c6. He plays f5. Now, very important to take, and continue this position, maybe with bishop f4, but Vidit makes a mistake. He takes g takes f5. Now, why is this wrong? Because after g takes f5, the knight is removed from here. The rook can get the open g file. Hans thinks for a bit and finds the right decision. Good move there. Knight jumps to c5 already. Black is better. Pawn to f4. Good move. Bishop needs to go. Oh, he goes back to c1, which is a mistake now. Very important now to play rook c8, king h1 and knight c2. Very nice move. Attacking here and here on d4. If you take bishop f3, game over. Because there's a very deadly discovered check that's going to happen. So can Hans find this move? Rook g8 combined with this deflection knight c2. No, he doesn't. He plays queen h3, which looks very strong, but it gives with it the chance to bring back his knight, limit this bishop, and now the position once again close to equality here. Still very complex and very difficult to play for both sides, especially for Vidit with just 45 seconds on the clock, while Hans Niemann has 1 minute 48 seconds. Where is this going to head to? Rook g8 played, and Vidit quickly safeguards his king on the h1 square. Bishop comes to h6, which is a fine move now, defending the f4 pawn, also opening up the g file. How is he going to continue? Maybe rook g1 is the move that you want to go for. And Vidit thinks for a bit. He needs to speed up. He has 31 seconds left. Hans has 1 minute 25 seconds. Rook g1 is played. We're waiting for what Hans does. He takes on g1. And Vidit takes with the king because he didn't want to take with the rook. The d4 pawn would be hanging. And now Hans goes knight to d5. King settles down on the h1 square once again, trying to give space for the rook. For now, everything on Vidit's mind is about survival more than anything else. He has less time. His position looks dicey, but at the same time, his knights are beautifully positioned. Also, don't forget the e7 pawn is weak. Later on, these central pawns will become monsters. Queen h5 played by Hans. Rook comes to g1. So Vidit slowly and steadily trying to make his position better. Knight goes to b4. Maybe the knight had to come to e3 instead of going to b4, because now Vidit can prepare later on b3, bishop a3. We spoke about this e7 pawn being weak. Queen g2 played for the time being. It's a good square for the queen because it not only defends f3 but also looks at the g8 and g7 square. Hans, he wanted to move the queen. He plays it to f5, which is a good square. And now Vidit has just 16 seconds. He plays his bishop to d2. Knight comes back to d5. You can take the knight now, which is what he does. Bishop takes, and now maybe go bishop b4. Fantastic move, attacking the e7 pawn. Not easy to defend it because rook here, you can take, and already there's a mate on the back rank. So very difficult. Rook g8 needed to be played here, but queen f7 is a big blunder because queen h3 can be played, but with it goes bishop c5. He's trying to be solid here. He doesn't have time. He has just 5 seconds. Hans Niemann, 22 seconds on the clock. He goes bishop c6, and now Vidit finds queen h3. Good move. He's winning here because if the bishop moves, there's knight g5. He takes on e4. Pawn takes e4. f3. Don't take the bishop with it because f2 and queen f3 is coming in and you will be mated. So queen f5. Excellent move found with just 2 seconds on the clock. Hans Niemann now decides to take, but now Vidit is completely winning. He's completely winning. Bishop e3 attacking the rook. Now go rook g3. So that at f2 there's king g2. No, he makes a mistake. Rook d1. Rook g8 played. Position is equal. Needs to take on e7. f6 blunder. f2. Hans, you play f2. Rook g1. You're winning. No, he takes here. Vidit goes bishop e7. Hans comes up. The position suddenly is around equal. Bishop h4. Fantastic maneuver found here by Vidit to block the g file so that the king can come forward. Bishop d4. You can't take the bishop because it's queening. He goes b4, safeguarding the pawn here. Hans Niemann now goes rook g5. And Vidit pushes the pawn forward. Rook comes back. King comes up, and now Hans must take care of his bishop because it's hanging. He takes on e6, but the bishop is blundered. Look at Hans Niemann. What has he done from a completely winning position there? He lost it, but Vidit, great handle on the nerves there, and both the players move away. Vidit takes the lead in this set with 3.5, 1.5. An extremely important victory. A small break for both the players. What an intense match this is turning out to be.